Millionaire was shocked to recognize the drive-in waitress. It was his childhood sweetheart who had been presumed missing for over 10 years. Get ready for a journey full of nostalgia and incredible twists. Today's story is truly remarkable, with an ending that's sure to touch your heart and leave you amazed. So, stay with me until the very last moment. I hope this experience is unforgettable for you, and may God bless you and your family. Now, let's get started. The neon sign of Joe's Drive-In cast a pink and blue glow across the hood of James Crawford's rental car. Chicago's autumn rain had followed him 40 miles out of the city, creating halos around the vintage establishment's lights. He hadn't planned on stopping, but after 3 hours of mind-numbing quarterly reports and budget meetings, the sight of the retro drive-in was too tempting to resist. The place looked frozen in time, straight out of 1959, or maybe 1979. James smiled at that particular year, trying to push away the memories it always brought. He pulled into a spot near the corner, where smooth oldies drifted from a mounted speaker. The Righteous Brothers were promising their eternal love through slightly scratchy audio. And for a moment, he was 18 again. A car hop in a turquoise uniform and white roller skates glided between the cars. Her tray balanced expertly as she served the Friday night regulars. James watched her work through his side mirror, something about her movements causing his heart to stutter. He shook his head, reaching for the menu stuck behind his windshield wiper. The success of his software company had earned him features in Forbes and Fortune, but tonight he just wanted a burger and shake like the ones he used to share with. He stopped that thought cold. 10 years was long enough to stop thinking about Sarah Mitchell. The sound of wheels on wet asphalt approached his window. James lowered it, keeping his eyes on the laminated menu. "Welcome to Joe's. Our special tonight is the Big Bopper Burger with—" The voice cut off abruptly. James looked up, and the world stopped spinning. Sarah Mitchell stood there, 10 years older but unmistakable, her hand frozen on her order pad, face pale beneath the neon lights. The pen slipped from her fingers, clattering against her skates. "Sarah." His voice came out as a whisper. She was already pushing away from his car, wheels clicking rapidly against the pavement. James fumbled with his seatbelt, nearly falling out of the car in his haste to follow. "Sarah, wait!" But she was through the staff door before he could reach her, leaving him standing in the drizzle as Frankie Valli promised to never let go over the outdoor speakers. Inside, through the wide windows, he could see the staff exchanging confused looks. A heavy-set man in a white apron, presumably Joe, appeared from the kitchen, looking concerned. After a brief conversation, another waitress emerged to approach James's car. "I'm sorry, sir, Amy isn't feeling well. Can I take your order instead?" Amy. Of course she'd changed her name. The girl who'd been declared missing 10 years ago, whose face had been plastered across their small town, on posters that yellowed and curled at the edges as months passed without answers. The girl whose disappearance had haunted their graduating class of 79, leaving a hole in their final yearbook where her senior portrait should have been. "Sir." The waitress, Jenny, according to her name tag, shifted uncomfortably. "Sorry, yes." James cleared his throat. "I'll take a chocolate shake and a Big Bopper burger." He hesitated, then added, "And please tell Amy. Tell her the Radio Shack guy says hello." Jenny's eyebrows lifted, but she nodded and skated away. James returned to his car, his mind racing back to the summer of 1979. The mall where he'd worked at Radio Shack, watching Sarah dance between customers at the record store across the way. Their shared breaks at Orange Julius, planning their futures between sips of fruity slush. The way she'd roll her eyes when he tried to explain computer programming, but would listen anyway, chin propped on her hand, smiling at his enthusiasm. Then August came, and she vanished. No note, no goodbye, no body ever found, just theories that grew wilder as the years passed, while James carried an ember of their summer love through college, through his first startup, through every success that followed. His food arrived, delivered by Jenny, with a small note tucked under the burger wrapper. In neat handwriting that he still recognized, "Backlot, 11 p.m., come alone." James checked his Rolex, 10:45. The parking lot had emptied considerably, the early dinner rush replaced by a few lingering couples sharing shakes. In the distance, the interstate hummed with late-night travelers, and somewhere a radio played Madonna's Crazy for You. At 10:55, he walked to the back lot, where employee cars gathered under flickering security lights. The rain had stopped, leaving everything with a glossy sheen. Sarah, or Amy, stood by a beat-up Volkswagen Beetle, her roller skates exchanged for worn sneakers. She'd pulled a denim jacket over her uniform, and her hair was down now, longer than he remembered. "You shouldn't have come looking for me." Her voice was harder than he remembered, but underneath he could hear the girl who'd once sung along to every song on the radio. "I wasn't looking. I didn't know." He took a step forward. She took one back. "Sarah, what happened? That night after the festival, you just... Everyone thought wrong." She hugged herself, looking past him toward the highway. "I'm not Sarah Mitchell anymore. Sarah Mitchell disappeared in 1979. Amy Walsh works here, lives a quiet life and doesn't talk about the past." "But why? Your parents, your friends, we all mourned you. Some people thought you were..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Ga dead," she laughed without humor. Sometimes that would have been easier. Her eyes finally met his, and despite the years between them, he felt 18 again, standing in the mall parking lot as she told him about getting accepted to Northwestern. "You need to forget you saw me, James. Go back to your life. You're doing well. I saw the magazine covers." "You've seen..." The thought that she'd known about him, maybe followed his career from afar, made his heart race. "I had to know you were okay." Her voice softened. "After everything, I needed to know you moved on." A car door slammed in the front lot, making her jump. "I have to go. Please, James, don't come back. Don't tell anyone you saw me. Just forget again." "I never forgot," he said quietly. "Cares not for a single day." She paused with her hand on the Beetle's door handle, and for a moment he saw a crack in her armor, a glimpse of the girl who'd once shared her dreams with him over cherry pie and endless summer nights. "Goodbye, James." She slipped into her car, the engine coughing to life. As she drove away, James stood in the empty lot, the weight of a decade's questions pressing down on him. The Sarah Mitchell he'd known would never have run away without reason. Something had happened that August night in 1979, something that still had her looking over her shoulder, and despite her warnings, despite the successful life waiting for him back in Chicago, despite his fiancée Diana and her father's merger offers, James knew he wouldn't be leaving town tomorrow as planned. Not until he understood why the only girl he'd ever truly loved had chosen to become a ghost. The Marriott's alarm clock blinked 3:47 a.m., but James hadn't slept. He sat in the dark, Diana's latest message still unanswered on his cell phone, staring at an old photograph he always kept in his wallet. The edges were worn smooth, the colors fading, but the image remained clear. Sarah outside the record store, surrounded by promotional posters for Blondie's Heart of Glass, flashing a peace sign at the camera and laughing. He closed his eyes, and suddenly it was June 1979 again. "Hey, computer guy!" Sarah's voice carried across the mall corridor. James looked up from the TRS-80 he was programming to see her leaning against the Record Town doorway, a new shipment of vinyl albums in her arms. "You're coming to lunch, right? Orange Julius in 10. He nodded, trying to ignore how his heart raced when she smiled. They'd been doing this dance for weeks. Shared breaks, accidental meetings by the fountain, her stopping by to browse the latest calculators while he worked. "Don't forget." She disappeared back into the store. The cars. My best friend's girl, following her out the door. His manager, Bill, chuckled. "That girl's sweet on you, Crawford. Even a computer can figure that out." James felt his face heat up. "We're just friends." "Sure, kid. That's why she walks past our store 6 times a day." The memory faded as James pulled into the Sunset Motel, a faded establishment that had seen better days. He'd called his office, citing a family emergency. Diana hadn't bought it. She knew he had no family in Illinois, but he'd deal with that later. The elderly clerk barely looked up from his crossword puzzle as James checked in. Room 115. Ice machines broken. The room smelled of old cigarettes and discount cleaning supplies, but it was close to Joe's drive-in. James spread his research materials across the bed. Old newspaper clippings he'd digitized years ago, printouts from the library's microfiche archives, everything about Sarah's disappearance, August 15th, 1979. The summer festival. Sarah had been scheduled to work until 9 but never made it home. Her car was found in the mall parking lot. Driver's door open, her purse still inside. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, no Sarah. The police had questioned everyone, including James. They'd been supposed to meet after her shift, but he'd been stuck late at Radio Shack doing inventory. By the time he got to the festival, she was already gone. "Your total is $4.25, Sarah said, her voice pulling James back to the present. He sat in his rental car at Joe's drive-in, watching her, Amy now, serve other customers. She moved differently, more guarded, but sometimes he caught glimpses of her old self in the way she'd laugh at a child's joke or twirl on her skates between orders. When she reached his car, her smile was professional, empty. "Welcome to Joe's. What can I get you?" "Sarah." "Amy," she corrected sharply. "Amy, please, just talk to me." She glanced around nervously. "I told you to leave. You knew about the magazine covers. You followed my career. Why?" A muscle twitched in her jaw. "Your burger will be ready in 10 minutes. She pushed off, skating away. But this time, she slipped something onto his dashboard, a napkin with hastily scrawled words, "Malton Creek Bridge, midnight, last chance." Summer 1979 rushed back again. Their first real date, watching Alien at the drive-in. Sarah had screamed and grabbed his hand during the chest-burster scene, then pretended she'd done it on purpose. They'd shared their first kiss that night, tasting like popcorn and possibility. "I'm going to study journalism," she'd told him later, as they sat on the hood of his car watching stars. "Break big stories, change the world." "Like Woodward and Bernstein." "Exactly." She'd turned to face him, her expression serious. "Size, there are things happening right here in town, James. Things people should know about." He'd been too distracted by her proximity to ask what she meant. The Malton Creek Bridge was exactly as he remembered, a simple wooden structure spanning a lazy creek where teenagers used to park. James arrived early, killing the engine and headlights. The only illumination came from a quarter moon and distant yard lights. At midnight precise, Sarah's Beetle pulled up behind him. She got in his passenger seat without a word, staring straight ahead. "The night you disappeared," James said quietly. "You were investigating something, weren't you?" She didn't answer for a long moment. When she did, her voice was barely a whisper. "I found documents in my father's study about Kingston Development." James knew the company. They'd built half the town's shopping centers in the 70s. Dad was their accountant. She swallowed hard. He discovered they were laundering money through construction projects, millions of dollars. When he threatened to expose them, they threatened me. "So you ran." "The FBI helped us disappear, witness protection." She laughed bitterly. Turned out Kingston Development had connections to some very dangerous people in Chicago. People who wouldn't think twice about silencing a whistleblower's family. But that was 10 years ago. Kingston Development went bankrupt in '82. The company did. The people behind it. She finally looked at him. "They're still out there, James. Some of them are even more powerful now. Why do you think I panicked when I recognized you? You're not exactly low profile anymore." "I can help," he said. "Yes, I have resources, connections." "No." She grabbed his arm. "You have to understand. These people, they're patient. They hold grudges. If they find out about me through you..." Her voice broke. "I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me. Not after all this time." The moonlight caught tears in her eyes. Without thinking, James reached to brush them away. She caught his hand, holding it against her cheek for just a moment before pulling away. "I shouldn't have agreed to meet you. I just needed you to understand why I left, why I can't come back." She reached for the door handle. "Promise me you'll leave tomorrow, go back to Chicago, to your life." "Sarah, promise me, James." He looked at her, really looked at her. Beyond the changes time had brought, he could still see the girl who'd dreamed of changing the world, who'd made him believe he could do anything. who'd disappeared and taken a piece of his heart with her. "I promise," he lied. She nodded once and was gone, her taillights disappearing into the night. James sat there for a long time, thinking about choices and consequences and the weight of old secrets. In his jacket pocket, his phone buzzed again. Diana's name lit up the display. He ignored it, starting his car and heading back to the Sunset Motel. He had research to do. Kingston development might be gone, but companies left paper trails, people left traces. And somewhere in those traces was the key to giving Sarah her life back. The Sunset Motel's coffee was terrible, but James barely noticed as he stared at his laptop screen. 3 days had passed since the bridge meeting, and Diana had progressed from concerned calls to outright threats about calling off their engagement. The merger with her father's company could collapse, taking millions in investments with it. He should care more about that than he did. Instead, he was obsessed with a list of names he'd compiled. Former Kingston development executives, board members, contractors. Most had moved on to other ventures after the bankruptcy. Some had died. Others had mysteriously prospered despite the company's collapse. "You promised you'd leave." James looked up. Sarah stood in his motel room doorway, still in her Joe's uniform, looking angry and scared and beautiful. "You're not the only one who can follow people," she said, stepping inside and closing the door. "I saw you at the library yesterday, the courthouse this morning." "Someone got away with hurting you," he said quietly, "with stealing your life. And you think you can fix that?" She paced the small room. "God, you haven't changed at all, have you? Still think you can solve any problem if you just try hard enough." Summer 1979 flickered through his mind. The day his TRS-80 program crashed, losing hours of work. Sarah had found him sulking at Orange Julius. "So write it again," she'd said, stealing one of his fries. "Try better this time. It's not that simple. Everything's simple with you, James." She'd smiled that smile that made his knees weak. "You see a problem, you solve it. That's why you're going to be successful someday." Yeah. And I'm going to write about it when you are." "I found something," James said, turning his laptop. Gregory Chen. He was Kingston's lead counsel until 2 months before you disappeared. Then he suddenly relocated to Chicago, joined Martinez and Sterling. They're one of the biggest firms in the Midwest now. Stop. He specialized in real estate law, but his client list includes several names connected to... "I said stop." Sarah slapped the laptop closed. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. These people, they don't just threaten, they act. Like they acted against your father." She went very still. "What do you know about that?" "The accident report. 3 months after you disappeared, a brake failure on the Pacific Coast Highway." Sarah sank into the room's faded armchair, looking suddenly exhausted. "Mom," she couldn't handle it. The running. The fear. She started drinking. Dad blamed himself. They were arguing. She closed her eyes. "The FBI said it was really an accident, but I've always wondered." James moved to kneel beside her chair. "Help me understand, please." She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she did, her voice was distant, lost in memory. "It started with the Riverwood Mall project. Dad found irregularities in the books, shell companies, inflated costs, materials that were paid for but never used. He dug deeper, found connections to other developments, other cities, money moving through fake contracts, fake employees." She opened her eyes, looking at him. He was going to go to the FBI, had everything documented, but someone at Kingston must have figured it out. What happened? Photos started arriving. Me leaving work. At the festival. In places I shouldn't have been followed. Then the calls started. Her hands twisted in her lap. "They knew things, James. Things only someone close could know. About me. About you." James felt cold. "About me. They said they'd make it look like you helped me steal documents, plant evidence. Your college acceptance would disappear. Your whole future." She took a shaky breath. "So we ran. That night, straight from the festival. The FBI had been building a case against Kingston's partners. They offered witness protection if Dad testified. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew you'd try to help, try to fix it, and they would have destroyed you. She touched his cheek briefly. I couldn't let that happen. A knock at the door made them both jump. Sarah was on her feet instantly, eyes wide with panic. "Mr. Crawford," a woman's voice. "James, I know you're in there." "Diana," James breathed. Sarah was already moving toward the bathroom window. "No." He caught her arm. "Wait." "James?" Diana knocked again, harder. Sarah pulled away. "I have to go." "Tomorrow," he whispered urgently. "Roller World. Remember where we used to—" She nodded once and slipped through the bathroom window just as Diana started using her spare key card, the one she'd insisted on having for emergencies. The door opened. Diana stood there in an expensive business suit, looking perfectly put together despite the late hour. Her expression shifted from anger to confusion as she surveyed the room, papers everywhere, coffee cups, his normally immaculate appearance rumpled. "What's going on?" She stepped inside, her heels clicking on the cheap linoleum. "The board meeting was yesterday. The merger paperwork is waiting. My father's threatening to pull out entirely. And I find you here in this—" She wrinkled her nose. "Place?" James looked at the bathroom window, still slightly open, then at his laptop with its lists of names and connections. On the nightstand, a photo had fallen from his wallet. Sarah, outside Record Town. Forever 18 and smiling. Diana followed his gaze. Her face hardened as she picked up the photo. "So who is she?" "Someone I used to know." "Used to?" Diana's perfectly manicured nail tapped the window ledge, where a few strands of long hair caught the light. "Why do I feel like that's not entirely accurate?" James took a deep breath. Everything was unraveling. His carefully built life, his engagement, the merger that would take his company global. He should care more about saving it all. Instead, he heard Sarah's voice from long ago. "Everything's simple with you, James. You see a problem, you solve it." "Diana," he said quietly, "we need to talk." But Diana was looking at his laptop screen, at the names and connections he'd mapped out. Her expression changed, becoming unreadable. "Martinez and Sterling," she said. "That's interesting. You know them. They handle some of Daddy's real estate holdings." She set the photo down carefully, including some he acquired from Kingston Development's bankruptcy sale. James felt the pieces shift, realigning themselves in his mind. Sarah's words echoed. "Some of them are even more powerful now." Diana smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I think you'd better tell me everything." Behind her, through the window, a car engine started. By the time James reached the parking lot, Sarah's Beetle was gone. But on his windshield, held by a wiper blade, was a single sheet of paper, the kind Record Town used to use for inventory lists in 1979. In Sarah's handwriting, "They're watching you now. Don't come to Roller World. Forget me. Please." James looked up at his motel room window, where Diana was making a phone call, her back turned. The simple solution would be to do what Sarah asked. Go back to Chicago, marry Diana, build his empire. The right solution was something else entirely. He got in his car and started the engine. He had research to do, and not much time to do it. After all, Sarah had taught him that important truth long ago. The best stories, like the best codes, revealed themselves if you knew where to look. And James Crawford had always been very, very good at finding hidden things. The Blockbuster video store was closing in 15 minutes. James sat in his car across the street, watching Sarah Amy browse the new releases section through the window. She'd traded her work uniform for jeans and an oversized sweater, looking so much like her teenage self that his chest ached. 3 days had passed since Diana's arrival. 3 days of carefully worded half-truths and business calls he couldn't avoid. 3 days of watching Sarah at Joe's, pretending she was just another waitress while piecing together the puzzle that had stolen her life. The store's front door chimed. Sarah emerged with a VHS tape, and James smiled despite himself. Say anything. Some things hadn't changed. He waited until she was in her car before following. Not to her apartment. He'd promised himself he wouldn't cross that line, but to make sure she got home safely. Diana's connection to Martinez and Sterling worried him more than he wanted to admit. His car phone rang. Diana again. He let it go to voicemail. Summer 1979 rose up like a heat mirage. The mall's video store, where they'd spent hours debating movies. Sarah arguing passionately for breaking away, while James championed the Warriors. They'd finally compromised on Rocky II, watching it at his house on his family's new VCR, a luxury in those days. "Thomas, that's us," Sarah had said during the training montage. "You're gonna be the champion of computers, and I'll be the champion of journalism. And we'll thank each other in our speeches." She'd thrown popcorn at him. Obviously. The memory dissolved as Sarah's Beetle turned down a side street. James kept his distance, more out of habit now than necessity. He'd memorized her route home days ago. His briefcase held the proof he'd found: property records, shell companies, a web of connections leading from Kingston Development's ashes straight to Diana's father. The kind of proof Sarah's father had died trying to expose. A song drifted from his car radio. Poison's "Every Rose Has Its Thorn." And suddenly Sarah's Beetle was pulling over. She got out, walking straight toward his car. James rolled down his window. "I'm just making sure you're safe. By following me." She leaned against his door, like they used to. "I found proof, Sarah, about Diana's father. About all of it." "I know." At his surprised look, she smiled sadly. "You think you're the only one who can investigate? I've known about Robert Sterling for years, known he bought Kingston's assets, known he married Gregory Chen's daughter." James felt the blood drain from his face. "Diana is Chen's daughter. Changed her name when her father did, probably to protect the family from Kingston's fallout." Sarah's fingers drummed nervously on his car door. "That's why I panicked when I recognized you that first night. Your fiancée. She's part of it all. I have to expose them. They'll destroy you. Let them try." She made a frustrated sound. "This isn't one of your computer problems, James. You can't just debug it until it works." "No," he agreed quietly, "but I can make it right." They stared at each other in the streetlight's glow. A passing car's radio played Madonna's "Crazy for You," and for a moment they were teenagers again, full of dreams and summer love. Sarah broke first. "Come with me." "What?" "To my place. There's something you need to see." He followed her Beetle to a small apartment complex on the edge of town. Her unit was on the second floor, sparsely furnished but neat. The walls were bare except for one framed photograph. The County Fair Ferris wheel at sunset. James recognized it. He'd taken that picture the week before she disappeared. Sarah disappeared into a closet, returning with a shoebox. "I kept records. Everything I could find about Kingston, about Sterling Properties, about the money trail. 10 years of research." She met his eyes. "I was going to send it anonymously to the FBI next week, before you showed up and complicated everything." "Sarah, I know that look." She hugged herself. "That's your, I'm about to suggest something crazy look. We do it together." He stepped closer. "Your evidence and my resources, we can protect each other. Like we couldn't before. We're not kids anymore." She looked away. "I can't ask you to risk everything. Your company, your future." "I already am." He touched her chin, turning her face back to his. "The moment I recognized you at Joe's, everything else stopped mattering." The air between them crackled with unspoken words. Sarah swayed slightly toward him, then caught herself. "James." Her voice was whisper soft. "We can't—" A sharp knock at the door made them jump apart. Through the peephole's fisheye lens, they saw Diana, flanked by 2 men in suits. "Mr. Crawford?" one of them called. "We're from Martinez and Sterling. We need to discuss some merger details." Sarah was already moving, grabbing the shoebox. "Fire escape. Now." "Sarah, trust me." She pressed a key into his hand. "Storage Unit 23 at Stop and Lock. Everything's there, but James—" She touched his face briefly. "Be careful who else you trust." Another knock, harder. "Mr. Crawford, we know you're in there." They slipped out the fire escape as the door lock clicked. Sarah pointed to where their cars were parked. "Take my Beetle. They'll look for your rental. I'll create a distraction." "What about you?" She smiled, and for a moment she was the fearless girl from Record Town again. I've had 10 years of practice disappearing. She squeezed his hand. Storage Unit 23. Don't let them win. Before he could respond, she was climbing back up the fire escape. Through her apartment window, he heard her voice. Can I help you? This is private property. James ran to the Beetle, the key burning in his pocket like a promise. As he drove away, he saw Sarah talking animatedly to the suits, gesturing toward the street behind the building, creating confusion, buying him time, just like the old days at the mall, when she'd distract his manager so James could sneak extra time programming after hours. Some things really hadn't changed. The Beatles' radio crackled to life. Someone had left in a mixtape. The Cure's Pictures of You filled the car as James headed for Stop and Lock, his heart pounding with equal parts fear and something else. Something that felt a lot like hope. Stop and Lock's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as James rolled up Unit 23's door. Sarah's Beetle had gotten him there safely, though he'd taken a circuitous route to ensure he wasn't followed. The mixtape had played through twice, a time capsule of their shared past. The Bangles, Tears for Fears, Simple Minds, songs that had once been their summer soundtrack. The storage unit was mostly empty, except for a stack of banker's boxes and an old Radio Shack TRS-80 computer that made his breath catch. He'd given it to her as a graduation present the week before she disappeared. You hate computers, he'd said in 1979, watching her unwrap it, but you love them. She'd traced the keyboard with careful fingers. And I love having one for writing articles. The almost confession had hung between them, electric with possibility, but they'd been young, careful with words that felt too big for their teenage hearts. The first box contained newspaper clippings, not just about Kingston development, but about every real estate project Robert Sterling had touched since 1979. Property transfers, corporate restructuring, board appointments. Sarah had traced it all. The second box held photographs, construction sites, meetings in restaurant parking lots, men in suits shaking hands. Each image carefully dated and annotated in Sarah's neat handwriting. The third box made his hands shake, bank statements, courier receipts, letters on Kingston Development letterhead. And at the bottom, a manila envelope marked Insurance in different handwriting. Older, masculine, her father's. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. You need to see this. Sarah's voice was tight with urgency. TV Channel 7. James found a small television in the storage facility's office. The night manager was asleep in his chair. Miami Vice reruns playing quietly. Change it to 7, James said, waking him. The screen showed firefighters battling flames at a familiar building, Sarah's apartment complex. Officials suspect an electrical fire started in a second-floor unit, the reporter was saying. No casualties reported, though several residents were treated for smoke inhalation. Sarah, I'm fine, she said quietly. I was already gone. But James, the men who came looking for you, they weren't lawyers. How do you know? Because real lawyers don't carry guns in shoulder holsters. James thought of the banker's boxes, the evidence they contained. Where are you? Safe. There's a place. Do you remember where you taught me to program? The library. Summer afternoons spent in the computer lab, showing her basic commands while stealing glances at her concentrated face. Meet me there 1 hour. She paused. And James, bring the insurance file. The line went dead. James grabbed the manila envelope and 1 box of photographs, leaving the rest. As he drove through empty streets in Sarah's Beetle, his mind raced. Diana's father, Gregory Chen, the men with guns, all connected to whatever was in that envelope, whatever had been worth killing for 10 years ago. The library was dark, except for emergency lights. Sarah waited in the shadow of the computer lab's doorway, wearing a denim jacket he recognized from high school. You kept it, he said softly. It was all I took that night. She touched the jacket's worn collar. Couldn't risk packing, but I was cold, and I left notes in the pocket. Every day that summer. I know. Her voice cracked slightly. I kept those too. They stood in charged silence until a distant siren made Sarah flinch. The envelope, she said. Did you bring it? James handed it over. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it, spilling papers onto a dusty computer desk. "Dad's original evidence," she whispered. "Bank transfers, offshore accounts, names of shell corporations, and—" She stopped, staring at a photograph. James looked over her shoulder. The image showed a younger Robert Sterling meeting with men whose faces he recognized from his research. Known criminals, the kind of people legitimate businessmen avoided. "This would have ruined him," Sarah said. "Him and everyone connected to Kingston, including Gregory Chen, including—" "Diana." James ran a hand through his hair. "That's why they needed the evidence gone. Why they needed your father silenced. And now his daughter is engaged to the man investigating tech industry fraud." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "They must have thought it was perfect. Control you through her, keep you from looking too closely at their other operations." Diana said her father suggested the merger. James felt sick. "She said it would be good for both companies. Good for hiding money through tech sector investments, maybe." Sarah shuffled through more papers. "These records, they show a pattern. Buy failing companies, hide money in fake development projects, sell the assets at a loss for tax write-offs, then do it again." A noise echoed from the library's main floor. Footsteps. Sarah quickly gathered the papers. Back door. Through the computer lab. They moved quietly through rows of Apple IIs and Commodores. James touched one old TRS-80 as they passed, remembering, "Print, hello, Sarah," he'd said in 1979, guiding her hands on the keyboard. "That's it. Just words on a screen. It's a start. Everything starts simple." She'd smiled that smile. "Like us." The footsteps grew closer. Sarah pulled him into a narrow supply closet, their bodies pressed together in the dark. Her breath was warm against his neck, her heart pounding against his chest. "James," she whispered, "if something happens—" "Nothing's going to happen." "But if it does—" Her fingers gripped his shirt. "I never stopped." The doorknob turned. Light spilled in. Diana stood there, looking perfectly composed despite the late hour. Two men flanked her, hands inside their jackets. "Really, James?" Her voice was ice cold. "A high school sweetheart? That's what this is about." "This is about murder," James said quietly. "About money laundering. About your father and what he did to Sarah's family. Alleged crimes from a defunct company." Diana stepped closer. "Ancient history. What matters is now. The merger. Our future." "You mean your father's future?" "Think carefully, James. Your company, your reputation, everything you've built." Her smile was almost pitying. "Kaist all that, you mean you're a waitress with a conspiracy theory." Sarah moved a step forward, but James caught her arm. "You're right," he said to Diana. "I have built something, a company that catches financial fraud, that exposes corruption." He met her eyes. "Want to guess what my new program found in Sterling Properties' accounts?" Diana's composure cracked. "You're bluffing. The algorithm never lies. That's why your father wanted the merger, isn't it? To bury the evidence before it went public." One of the men started to draw his gun. Sarah tensed beside James. "Too late," James said calmly. "The program ran yesterday. Results went straight to the SEC. Automated. Unalterable." "You're lying. Check your phone." Diana's hand shook as she pulled out her cell phone. Her face went pale as she read, "Daddy." Her voice was small, young. "Yes, I understand." She looked at James with something like respect. "You really did it." "Everything's simple," Sarah whispered. "You see a problem, you solve it." Diana nodded to her men. They melted away into the darkness. "The SEC will have questions," Diana said, "for all of us." "I'll answer them," James replied, truthfully. Diana smoothed her perfect hair. "Goodbye, James." She turned to Sarah. "He was always yours, wasn't he? Even when he was mine." Sarah said nothing, but her hand found James's in the dark. They watched Diana walk away, her heels clicking into silence. In the distance, sirens grew closer, but this time they weren't coming for them. Sarah leaned against him, trembling slightly. "Is it really over?" James looked down at their joined hands, at the evidence scattered around them, at the old computers that had started everything. No, he said softly. It's just beginning. Outside, dawn was breaking over the library's windows. A new day, a new chance. And in the computer lab where it all started, surrounded by the ghosts of summers past, James Crawford finally told Sarah Mitchell what he should have said 10 years ago. But that's another story. The morning sun streamed through Joe's drive-in windows as James sat in his usual spot, watching Sarah, still Amy to the other customers, glide between cars on her skates. 2 weeks had passed since the library confrontation. The SEC investigation was ongoing, making headlines in the Chicago Tribune. Robert Sterling and Gregory Chen had both resigned from their positions. Diana hadn't contacted him since that night, but Sarah still kept her distance, still played her role as Amy Walsh, even though they both knew she didn't have to anymore. "Your usual?" she asked, stopping at his window with her order pad. "Actually," James held up 2 tickets. "I was wondering if Amy Walsh might want to go skating tonight. Roller World's having an 80s night." A flash of their old connection sparked in her eyes before she covered it. "I don't think that's a good idea. The FBI cleared you yesterday, full immunity in exchange for your testimony." He watched her expression carefully. "You're free, Sarah." "Free?" she laughed softly. "I haven't been free since I was 18. Summer 1979 shimmered in the morning heat. Roller World on teen night, multicolored lights spinning as they skated in circles. Time after time, playing over the speakers while Sarah taught him to cross one foot over the other. "It's all about trust," she'd said, skating backward, holding his hands. "Trust yourself. Trust your partner." He'd fallen anyway, pulling her down with him. They'd laughed until the manager threatened to kick them out. "One song," James said now. "That's all I'm asking." Sarah bit her lip. "I have tables. Joe already gave you the night off." At her surprised look, he smiled. "He says Amy Walsh has worked every Friday for 10 years. She deserves a break." The order pad trembled slightly in her hand. "I don't know how to be Sarah Mitchell anymore." "Then be whoever you want to be. Just," he took a breath, "be real with me, like you used to be." She stared at him for a long moment. Finally, she tucked the order pad in her pocket. "Pick me up at 8, she said quietly. "Don't be late." James watched her skate away, his heart lighter than it had been in years. That evening, he parked outside her temporary apartment, a small rental paid for by the FBI, until she could reclaim her identity. She emerged wearing jeans and a vintage Rolling Stones t-shirt he recognized from high school. "You kept it?" he asked, as she slid into the passenger seat. "Like the jacket." She smoothed the worn fabric. "Some things, they're harder to let go of than others." The drive to Roller World was quiet, charged with unspoken words. REO Speedwagon played softly on the radio. "Can't fight this feeling." And Sarah hummed along unconsciously, just like she used to. The rink hadn't changed much in 10 years. Same carpet, same rental skates, same snack bar serving Dr. Pepper and Pop Rocks. The DJ was playing Forever Young, and couples circled the floor in a counterclockwise dance as old as roller rinks themselves. They laced up their skates on a bench near the lockers where they'd once stored their school books during summer sessions. Sarah's fingers moved automatically, muscle memory unchanged by time. "I used to dream about this place," she said suddenly. "During the first year in witness protection, I'd wake up thinking I could hear the music, smell the popcorn." She looked at him. "See you waiting by the rink wall, pretending you weren't nervous about falling." "I was always nervous around you," James admitted. "Not about falling." The DJ switched to Time After Time. Sarah's breath caught. "Our song," James said softly. "James. One dance. Remember." He stood, offering his hand. "It's all about trust." She took his hand, let him guide her to the rink. They joined the flow of skaters, finding their rhythm together like no time had passed. Sarah's hand was warm in his, her movements as graceful as ever. "I filed the paperwork yesterday," she said as they glided past the snack bar, "to reclaim my name, my life. What will you do after?" "I thought..." She bit her lip. "There's a local paper. They're looking for an investigative reporter." James smiled. "Breaking big stories, changing the world." "Something like that," She squeezed his hand. What about you? Your company is doing fine. The SEC investigation actually helped our reputation. Turns out catching real fraud is good for business. They skated in silence for a moment, the lyrics washing over them. If you're lost, you can look and you will find me, time after time. I meant what I started to say, Sarah said quietly. In the library closet, I never stopped. A kid wobbled in front of them. They separated to avoid collision, muscle memory again, coming back together smoothly on the other side. I know, James said. Me neither. Sarah's eyes shimmered in the rink's rotating lights. It's not that simple anymore. We're not teenagers. I'm not the same person. Neither am I. He guided them through a turn. But some things don't change, like how I feel when you smile, or how your nose crinkles when you're thinking hard, or how my heart still races when you're close. James. Or how I've measured every relationship against what we had, how nothing ever felt as real. They'd stopped skating, standing still as other couples flowed around them. Sarah's hand trembled in his. I'm scared, she whispered, of feeling this much again, of losing it again. Then we'll take it slow. He touched her cheek gently. Start simple. Build something new. The DJ faded one song into another. Sweet Dreams by the Eurythmics, Sarah's favorite. Once upon a time. Simple, she repeated, a ghost of her old smile playing at her lips. Like teaching me to program. Exactly. Print. Hello, Sarah. She laughed then, the sound pure and real and free. Hello, James. They started skating again, moving together like they'd never stopped. Around them, Roller World spun in its timeless dance of light and music, and young love made new again. And if anyone noticed that Amy Walsh was gone, replaced by a woman who skated like she was 18 again, they didn't say anything. Some stories, after all, deserve their moment of magic. Some loves deserve their second chance. 3 months later, James stood in front of Record Town's old location in the mall, now a cell phone kiosk. The place was changing. New stores, new faces, the 80s fading into memory. But if he closed his eyes, he could still hear Blondie playing through the store speakers, still see Sarah dancing between the vinyl racks. Ready, her voice behind him, real and present. He turned. Sarah wore a press badge from the local paper. Her third investigative piece had just been published, exposing corruption in the county zoning board. Her hair was shorter now, professional, but her eyes still held that same sparkle that had captured his heart at 17. I'm just remembering, he said. She took his hand, warm and solid. Good memories. The best. They walked through the mall, past Orange Julius where they'd shared countless drinks, past the fountain where they'd thrown pennies and made wishes. The Radio Shack was now a trendy clothing store, but the computer lab where it all started was still there, teaching a new generation of programmers. Did you ever think we'd be back here? Sarah asked, stopping at the mall's main entrance. Like this, I hoped. He squeezed her hand. Every single day. The fall air was crisp as they stepped outside. Sarah's Beetle was parked next to his car, the same spot where she'd disappeared that August night, but today wasn't about the past. You never told me, she said as they walked to the cars. How did you know? About Diana's father. The SEC investigation. James smiled. Remember that program I was working on that summer? The one that crashed? The pattern recognition algorithm. I rebuilt it. Better. Had 10 years to perfect it. He stopped walking, turned to face her. It was always meant for you, to help with your journalism, to find the stories hidden in the numbers. Sarah's eyes widened. All this time, everything I built, every success, it started with wanting to help you change the world. He touched her cheek. I just never expected you'd come back and change mine instead. The setting sun painted the parking lot in shades of gold and pink, like a scene from one of their old movie nights. In the distance, a car radio played the police's Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic. I have something for you, James said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a small package wrapped in Record Town paper he'd found on eBay. Sarah unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a cassette tape, hand-labeled in teenage James's careful writing, "Songs for Sarah, Summer, 79. I recreated it," he explained. "All the songs we used to love, even found that weird B-side you were obsessed with." "She's like the wind," Sarah laughed, then stopped, noticing something else written on the tape. "What's this at the bottom?" "Play it." They got into her Beetle, the same car that had helped him escape that night at the storage facility, now restored to its former glory. Sarah pushed the tape into the deck with trembling fingers. The first notes of Time After Time filled the car, but after the first verse, the music faded, replaced by teenage James's voice. "Sarah, if you're listening to this, I finally found the courage to tell you. I love—" The tape clicked off. "That's the original," James said quietly. "I made it the day you disappeared. Never got to give it to you." Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel. "James, I'm not 18 anymore. I know love is more complicated than a mixtape and a confession." He took her hand. "But some things, some feelings, they don't change. They just get deeper, truer." She turned to him, tears catching the sunset's light. "Ask me again." What you asked at Roller World, that first time." James smiled, remembering. "Sarah Mitchell, will you go steady with me?" She laughed through her tears. "That's not what you asked." "No," he agreed. "I asked if I could kiss you." The parking lot was empty now, the mall's lights coming on one by one. In the tape deck, Time After Time started playing again, filling the silence with memories of summer love and second chances. Sarah's hand found his cheek, just like that night at the drive-in so long ago. "Yes," she whispered. Their first kiss in 10 years tasted like cherry lip gloss and possibility, like every dream they'd shared at 17, made richer by the years between, like a love story that had taken the long way around but finally found its way home. When they broke apart, Sarah rested her forehead against his. "Think it's too late to request a song at Roller World?" "Never." James started the Beatles engine. "What did you have in mind?" She smiled that smile, the one that had haunted his dreams for a decade, the one that still made his heart skip. "Something about time, and finding your way back, and love that never really ends." They drove through the twilight, leaving the mall and its memories behind. But some things they took with them: a mixtape full of promises, a love story 10 years in the making, and the simple truth they'd learned one summer long ago. Sometimes the best programs, like the best loves, just need time to debug, to grow, to become what they were always meant to be. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get a second chance to press play. Thank you for watching today's story. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel to relive the magic of the 80s every day with our heartfelt stories. May God bless you and your family, and don't forget to click on the video popping up on the screen right now. It's another totally rad story you won't want to miss. See you in the next video, and stay awesome.